Welcome once again to the Movie Stuff Show. This week we're going to be ranking the cleavage from Charmed. That's what we're doing.
It's a full Milano, you guys.
See, this is why we get a lot of clicks
on
lately,
3.
but not a lot of minutes.
That's it. It just started. It's like, wait, what are you doing this week?
What is this?
I do not think Fred Rogers would approve of this conversation or
Oh,
the conversation that we were having prior to the show.
Lord, no.
Maybe one of his puppets would. Maybe he'd have to bring out one of his puppets to be part of the conversation.
Yeah. We're off and running.
We are. We got this going.
Spoilers already.
Spoilers.
Guys, Mr. Rogers had puppets.
I was gonna try and get us trending by opening the show. I mean, burning my T-shirt here, but I'm not a complete asshole, so I don't want to do that.
You know, listen, I know we cross over into political stuff on this show very regularly, but the thing that just
wait till next week.
The thing that just irks me about all this is there are homeless veterans, people who fought in the military, who are homeless, that do not have shoes and do not have socks, and you are ripping your socks up and you're burning your shoes, and these people could use those socks and shoes. So what is this all about? What is this all about?
It's about trending.
Being right.
Trending.
It's about being right. Come on.
That doesn't get you clicks. Come on now, stop it.
I just don't get this sometimes, man. Like,
sure you do.
And you know, we'll get into some religion stuff because this, you know, talking about this Mr. Rogers documentary, we'll talk about some religion. It just really, is this what Jesus was about? Is Jesus about burning Nike swooshes? Was that his main? Like, I went through all the up to what's the last confirmation? Is that the highest one? I did all that stuff, right? I was baptized, communion, confirmation. I went through all that stuff. So I'm not a Bible expert. I'm not. But nowhere in my Christian learnings did I see anything about Jesus burning Nike swooshes. I don't get it. I don't. You think Fred Rogers would approve of this? You think Mr. Rogers would approve?
Well, actually, I guess we'll just start talking about it. They did touch on a few things about how he would try and deal with today, and it doesn't seem like
he was, you know, I think
seemed like he checked out at the end. I don't know.
I'm not saying checked out. I think he just realized
defeated.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, you've got to appreciate that by the time he was retiring, 2 full generations had been brought up on his programming, and his indoctrination plan didn't work. Like, you kind of get the feeling that if every kid had been raised watching Mr. Rogers, that we'd be living in a utopia right now.
It's quite possible.
And it didn't work.
No.
So he had to be like, wow, I've lived long enough to see the outcome of my experiment, and I don't know that it really achieved the result I wanted.
Yeah, so
and that was kind of
that he probably it really was unfortunate, because at the time in the 80s when PBS started to really pick up views and become more of a household thing, this thing called cable also emerged, and then in the 90s the internet started emerging. So his audience, the ability to reach the audience had just dwindled. Like, he started picking up steam and it just kind of like dropped off. So I don't know. I watched Mr. Rogers when I was a kid. I did. Can't really remember it. I was really young, but I did.
Yeah.
I watched Mr. Rogers when I was a kid.
Yeah.
It was one of the few shows. It was that. It was Mr. Wizard. Love Mr. Wizard. It was a fantastic show.
I think Mr. Rogers was on right before Shining Time Station. And then probably Sesame Street was on right after that.
Yeah.
Dan, are you seeing anything in our feed there? Because it seems like me and Amanda are freezing a lot on the YouTube.
No one's mentioned anything.
Yeah.
Anybody watching?
Not really. The stream says that you're good too, but so on the YouTube video yourself, you see a lot of freezing.
It just seems like it stops and starts. I mean, we're not moving a whole lot, but it does seem like it's doing that.
Well, we should move so that we can tell. Hi. We're talking about whether Mr. Rogers' great experiment succeeded or failed. And I'm making light of a really sorry, I'm making light of a really serious idea, and it's not really appropriate. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, everything's looking good over here. It's weird.
All right, it's just my end.
Who knows? Who knows? So what are we talking about? Mr. Rogers. Yeah. So he failed. Is that what you're saying, Amanda?
Oh, I mean, not that he failed, but I don't think he really achieved the results that he wanted. And I think that's more just kind of a symptom of the school of psychological development that he was part of, where it's like, yeah, like, okay, some adults are messed up adults because they were messed up kids, but some adults are assholes and they were fine. Like you guys, your kids, your daughters might grow up to be jerks. They might just be bad people and it's not your fault.
Maybe. It's probably going to be my fault.
I mean, a good bet, you know.
I
would.
But I put a good amount of money on it.
I would blame you.
Yeah, no.
It's just in the later segments where they spoke with him. It seemed like it was. Well, I picked up on two things. One, I picked up on kind of disappointment, and then I also picked up on a little bit of like entertainment gatekeeperism. Like, you guys are doing television wrong. You guys are doing the internet wrong. And like, I'm the only one who knows how to do it right. I'm like, well, if you were so good at it, like, we would all be adults who hugged each other all the time. So,
I agree on that point too. When they started criticizing some of the other, I think there needs to be a balance, right? I mean, my kids watch a lot of this intellectual, and pretty much all cartoons nowadays have to have some form of educational value to it. They even, like, before each show, it's like, in this you'll learn how to make friends and learn how to solve puzzles or learn math things. Like, they basically tell you beforehand. But it's like Paw Patrol. It's like, you'll learn how to socialize with others. It's like, you're not learning. This show has nothing to do with socializing with others. It's a bunch of dogs and this rich kid. I don't know how this kid affords all this stuff where his dogs can have like jetpacks and airplanes. But that's what Paw Patrol is all about, right? But there needs to be this balance. I think you need the educational balance, and I think you need the dumb, just kind of like, I'm just gonna watch a show because I need to just watch gummy bears bouncing from here to there, right? I mean, was there any educational value to gummy bears? Tailspin? Did you learn a lot of moral lessons on Tailspin? I don't think so.
It was about adventures and teamwork, probably at some level.
DuckTales, don't be bad. Don't steal
don't be that greedy.
Your uncle's dime. I think there needs to be a balance. I agree, though. I felt that towards the end. Overall, I thought it was an emotional documentary. I enjoyed it. I didn't really... I never realized how religious he was, right? I mean, I think he hid that quite well, or at least to me. I never picked up on it. I just thought he was just a...
I would say that's more. I'd say that's more the fault of people you know in your life who are very religious, because I think that his behavior and his temperament is very Christian ideal from my vague understanding of Christianity, and the fact that I'm surprised by that is more a failing on, the people I've met.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
I wasn't even aware of the minister thing. That was one of the things that surprised me. Yeah.
I learned that. I didn't know.
And
the part that surprised me was the music.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
I didn't realize he was playing piano and writing the music, and that he had all of that training in addition.
Yeah.
I thought he was just a nice guy.
I loved how we started it, where they show I guess, some kind of behind the scene footage of him on the piano talking about life being these different modulations, and him kind of describing, and him even expounding at that point, like, this is probably too complicated for anyone else to realize, but it's what I feel, and that kind of explained the entire show. You know, it was completely the ideas of it, at least, were too complicated for kids, but it's how he believed it should be done, and it worked to an extent, like you said. And then I really like the fact too, he started in 68, and he did the run of shows, and he kind of thought that would be enough, I guess, to last forever. And they do and don't. You get to the first episode he did still works today, scary, frighteningly enough, when he's talking about King Friday and building walls and that type of shit. But then when he had to, like, then they see the rise of superhero stuff, and he felt like that when you start seeing the anger in him. That
like,
you're talking about.
Okay, that was the number one surprise for me, was that Mr. Rogers didn't like Superman.
Well, that had kids jumping out of buildings, which was,
I mean, did that really happen? I mean, I guess it did really happen, but I feel like that's like a Tide Pod thing, where it's like one kid really did it, and then we heard rumors about, like, Mr. Rogers didn't like Superman. What? That seems so weird.
Well, it was Batman and Superman, and I guess all these that just made kids more violent in nature, which frightened him, of course. And then it was the Transformers in the '80s, and then the Power Rangers in the '90s, and so on and so on.
I mean, maybe this kind of brings up something. I wrote notes. If you, I have notes. Yeah. So one of the things I wrote was that in general, it seemed like one of the things that Mr. Rogers was, one of the ideas he was trying to get across was he was already fighting sort of this sense of toxic masculinity. And I feel like that's a bit of what he didn't like in the superheroes, was that it's not that they were heroes, it was that they were like heroes who were active fighters, and that he was trying to sort of teach kids that it was okay to not do that. I feel like he had a very strong view that society would be better without toxic masculinity, without like people being aggressive and assertive and active. It seemed like he was a very like pacifist.
He was a big time pacifist, yeah.
Passive type of guy. And so like I could see him being sort of like personally offended to have, Transformers or something where it's very very indulgent in like traditional boy stuff. So like in that light, it seemed pretty progressive. And I even wrote down, I thought of that when they were talking about how the policeman who sang, the singing policeman, was gay, and he was like, Mr. Rogers was so against traditional masculinity that people assumed he was gay. And he's like, I know he wasn't.
That was a weird clip. What was that? The TV host he was talking with, was that Charles Gordon, or what his name was? Some talk show in the 80s where the guy just came out straight and like, are you straight? What's going on? And I was like, all right, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And then how they touched on all the different, I guess, the parodies of him, which I remembered a lot through the idea, especially the Jim Carrey one on The Living Color. And it seems like it bothered him to some extent. He was able to laugh himself on some of them, but I guess some of them he thought were just mean-spirited, and I guess that was his whole point, being, not enjoying mean-spirited humor. I don't know how. I don't think he would like anything that's going on today in that regard. But
oh man, I don't think he'd be. Yeah.
I feel like what they didn't emphasize enough, and this was one of my things throughout the entire documentary, was they didn't emphasize the passage of time enough. Because one of the things that would hurt more is that those parodies that came out in the 80s, like, those were made by people who were young enough to have watched him earlier.
Right.
So, like, could you imagine if you're like, oh, hey, like, that would be like, okay, I know SNL must have done like a Blue's Clues parody, right?
Probably.
Like that would be, but it hasn't quite been long enough. That would be like if somebody was doing a Blue's Clues parody of Steve, and like,
or Joe.
Or yeah, Joe. That's right.
Which one? There's two. There's Steve and
right.
Joe.
But the point would be if, and like, as the actor who played Steve is watching this, like, he knows for a fact that that kid watched Blue's Clues growing up. That would just be like, did you, like, you loved this when you were 5? Like, why are you making fun of it now? Like you should be thanking me, you ungrateful children. I tried to give you utopia. All you had to do was listen to my advice. So I could see a little bit of like the taking it personally there. And I think it just shows that he was a very big person to not drop into that.
Well, they show the segment from the show where he plays the record of laughter, and then he can stop it when he wanted to.
Yeah.
And it was, I think, like you said, the Eddie Murphy one was a kind of parody, just like a black version of Mr. Rogers, where I guess he can laugh at. But the Jim Carrey one is more of just saying, kind of just coming out saying Mr. Rogers is probably a behind the scenes pervert who beats the hell out of people if he wants. So I guess
the Johnny
something
Carson
like that
one was the worst.
Oh God, yeah, I don't know what that was. That was weird.
A prostitute. Yeah. Like that one, I think that one was the worst.
Yeah, so I could see how those he wouldn't have appreciated more than the others.
Yeah, very little criticism. This movie's getting very good, solid reviews, but some of the criticism is that it didn't really try to pull some of those threads about his depression. Like they mentioned it kind of briefly.
It depends on who you talk. These things, it depends on who you're going to talk to. So, I mean, if they could have asked 5 other people, that might have done it. I wish they would have. They kind of touched on it very slightly because they have his 2 sons in the movie, one who looks just like him, and the other one who just looks like his mother, which is kind of funny. But they talk on it for maybe a minute about how it was hard to be, Mr. Rogers'
like
kids,
the son of Jesus.
I mean, like Santa's kids or something. When you got to care for everyone else and just equally. So it's, I'm sure there are times when they didn't feel as important as everybody else, and they mentioned like just a minute or so. It would have been nice to see if it could have expounded on that some. But like I said, they didn't want to they touched on everything for the most part, but they didn't want to delve into anything too negative.
Towards the end, though, they were just running through a checklist. It's like, no, he didn't have tattoos. No, he wasn't gay. No, he was not a serial killer. No, like they just started like checking off all these. He was not in the Marines. Like, he did not kill people. So it's all these rumors of childhood star. I mean, you're talking about Blue's Clues, right? There's the rumor that Steve from Blue's Clues had died in a car crash or overdosed. Like, he comes out every so often. It's like, still alive. He was touring Steve. He was the original guy. His band was touring with the Flaming Lips a few years back. So that's what he's up to.
Please tell me his band does a cover of like the Male song or something.
But I mean, it is refreshing in that he stayed. We still haven't found anything horrible about him. I mean, we lost Cosby. We lost, Pee Wee Herman was caught masturbating somewhere. We got Bob Saget turned out to be a filthy comedian who bangs 20-year-old. I mean, all the people from our youth who were supposed to be these, father figures or whatever turned out to be creeps for the most part.
Minor tangent about Cosby, too. The whole thing that happened with the actor from The Cosby Show. He was working at the Trader Joe's.
Yeah.
It didn't even dawn on me until all this stuff came out that, there's people on that show that are just getting killed financially.
Not getting residuals anymore.
Because the show, it never even, crossed my mind. It was just like, all right, well, that makes sense. You can't air Cosby Show because of all this stuff, but it's like, here's a dude that was financially tied to getting residuals from this show, and now he's just not anymore.
But even then, I doubt he was getting much. I was more surprised that people were shocked that the
actors were
7th guy on the Cosbys from was somehow wasn't living it up somewhere in Bel Air.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's not. And he's been a working actor since, but he's just a guy, side part here, side part there. He's not like
he's done a couple episodes of
wasn't even
Sunny.
the run of the cops. I think he was like maybe the last 4 seasons or something. I mean, what?
I'm noticing the freezing you're talking about, by the way. I think Skype is just acting like a jerk. I mean, at this point, I can try to restart it and then put our little disclaimer up, but I'll just figure we'll power through it. Hopefully it just gets better. You never know what's going to happen with Skype. It's Microsoft. They're actually moving away from Skype. They're replacing it with Teams. I don't know if you know about Amanda.
Oh, well, that's great because my company still hasn't rolled out Skype for all of us at work. So I would love for them to transition to something else entirely so that I can be like 5 systems behind.
Yeah. Well, they're going to release Skype for Business 2019, and then after that, they're just going to start moving right to Teams, which is great because Teams video is so much better than Skype. Sorry. I'm really going on a tangent here.
Well, I don't know. I mean, so I don't know. I asked around a little bit to find out people I know from work and, like my husband, to see like how many people really watched Mr. Rogers growing up. And I always like maybe I watched it when I was even younger than I can remember. But like I remember thinking it was kind of boring and like I didn't really like it. And that's what everybody else remembers is they're like, oh yeah, I know I like watched it a little bit, but like I don't really remember. It was just kind of quiet and boring. And that's kind of this documentary is kind of the same way where it's like there's almost nothing wrong with it. All right, and we're done. Like what are you going to say? Like it's a little over an hour talking about actual facts about Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to again paint him in
and like you were saying there wasn't a lot of insight. There wasn't a story.
Sure, but I'd like to see his reaction to certain things, like how he dealt with the Challenger exploding and how he dealt with 9/11 and how he dealt with some of these things, because I wasn't familiar with that. And as a parent, and the offshoot of Mr. Rogers is a cartoon called Daniel Tiger. It's great. It's on PBS. It's based off the puppet, and it's got King Friday and X the Owl, and so they're all. But it's a great cartoon, and my kid has learned so much from that, and it's all comes from the roots, and I find it more enjoyable than Mr. Rogers, but all the same songs. What do you do with the method? It's the same kind of songs that were there, the same themes, like how to deal with anger and how to deal with jealousy and patience and using the potty. There's just if you gotta go potty, stop, go right away. Flush, then wash, and be on your way. Like, I'm serious. So, I mean, I think he'd be happy with the fact that his legacy's kind of lived on to this generation. Where my kid, she loves Daniel Tiger. I got 3 Daniel Tiger apps on my phone. Seriously. And,
wow.
And if I went upstairs, I can bring down. I have 2 trolleys. I have a bunch of Daniel Tigers, all these little figurines, 2 stuffed Daniel Tiger toys. I have a picture. I can probably find the picture on my phone of Annie meeting Daniel Tiger a couple years back. It's crazy that his legacy is still lived on, but it makes me happy in that way. And I actually find the show more entertaining than Mr. Rogers.
I really enjoyed the scene in Congress when I guess it was 1971 or so, 69, 70, whatever.
Yeah, the Nixon
beginning of Nixon's administration. And that congressman, what was his name? He was a fucking cartoon
Pas-
character.
Pasquarelli, Pasquarelli, yeah, he was.
It was And I think about that, like now, if he would even have an effect, because you look at, timeliness of this now, because you look at our current system where there's hearings going on, and all it is one person gets up there and gives a speech, then the next person gives a speech, and
oh wow,
yeah.
that's your kid on the internet.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, you can barely see her.
And he's on.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, like the fact that he, was the reason they even got money, and 20 million in 68, which they're probably not even getting that much now, sadly enough.
Not to say unfortunately, the impact of that was kind of lost on me because I had recently seen that video show up on Facebook. So I was, I've already seen the whole, where he's singing the song and the guy's like, well, Mr. Rogers, you just got yourself $20 million or whatever. Like I already seen. So when it came up,
it didn't seem real. It seemed like they would like a. It's like what? How does this work? You can just get up there and be nice.
What happened in this recent administration? It's like PBS gone. It's like
it's not 0.000 half of a fucking percent of our budget, but it's like, oh, we got to cut that because it makes liberals weak or whatever the fuck, And they get into that at the end too.
They start getting into the snowflake thing and
they start showing the Fox News scumbags.
Which again doesn't make any sense because if Mr. Rogers has been making shows since the '60s, that means that the people calling us snowflakes were raised on it first and then had their kids watch the same thing.
Yeah,
that's what it was. That fucking
pisses me off.
Garbage Kilmeade was on there. Oh, now because Mr. Rogers' generation doesn't need to work. Like, that was you, asshole. That was your generation.
Yeah.
That was you. That's not us. You raised us.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's time for a commercial break. Do we need a breather? Do we need a timeout?
I have an irreverent observation I can share.
Okay.
So one of the things that they showed that was interesting was that he would go swimming every day.
Mm-hmm.
And when they brought that up, it was this whole thing related to 143 was his favorite number and it meant I love you and all that stuff. But those swimming sequences really reminded me of in the X-Files when an episode would like start with Fox Mulder like swimming at the Y or whatever in like the red swim trunks. So I got like a serious X-Files vibe from that part. And I just wanted to
I'm not sure I bought that 143 either. He was a fairly tall guy. I'm not sure he was weighing 143 pounds his whole life.
Well, it was magic. You don't have to.
And then it just turned into a sleazy way to text somebody instead of typing out, I love you.
Yeah.
Was that the case? Like I didn't realize.
Yeah.
Yeah,
there was a whole thing on the Stern show back a couple of years ago where this guy found out his wife was texting another man, and he kept finding 143 on her phone and didn't know what the hell it meant, and so he looked it up and said, "I love you," and that's how I found out she was cheating. So when I saw it on thing, I was like, "Oh, that's where it came from."
Thanks a lot, Mr. Rogers. You ruined this man's marriage.
So one of the other things I wrote down that I thought was interesting was that he came up with the idea for children's educational television like the first time he saw a TV.
Yeah, that's that's probably a little whitewashing of
yeah. But still, so I had two thoughts of that. One was, what if he'd been like the other kind of Christian? We might have had like those mega church sermons on TV even earlier. And then the other thought I had was like, is there an internet equivalent to that? Like is Wikipedia like that? Like someone saw the internet and they said like, hey, we could do something useful with this for a change?
No, the thing is, someone really creepy saw the internet first, and then they realized we can make porn with this, and then that's how that happened.
Well, but no. I'm just thinking of like it's kind of astonishing that TV was a new technology essentially, and he like right away had this idea, and also that back then you didn't like like no one had television experience, so anybody could just walk in there and be like, I'm going to produce a TV show. Like it didn't talk much about like, did he know somebody? Did he have money? Like
Yeah,
how did
well,
he get that
They did
started?
yeah,
say
they
he was
mentioned he was
rich.
a rich
Yeah,
kid.
they said he
Yeah,
was a rich kid.
the weird camera guy kind of touched on the fact he was a rich kid.
And I think part of it was that he was doing these social outreach and these group sessions with kids, and so I'm guessing the thought probably filtered in his mind of maybe doing like not like a stage thing, but more of a group session where in front of kids, like a live audience type thing of doing puppets and music and stuff like that. And then probably when TV came along, he's like, well, hell with doing like, why do like a room when I can, reach a
Yeah.
bigger audience? That's kind of how I thought. And yeah, he did come from money.
That progression sounds a lot more natural. The documentary did give the impression that he was just sort of like incredibly insightful and had this like, oh wow, what is this square box? I can use this to make the world better by teaching children. By golly, I'll do it tomorrow.
How'd you get out of
Oh,
it?
that was great.
How'd you get back in? I think they said it. Maybe no, they didn't. I don't think they said it in the documentary. I think I saw someone say about this is how Mr. Rogers really is in many ways a predecessor for YouTube. The success of these YouTube videos, his arc and how he builds success out of this type of show is mirrors a lot of the way that YouTube content creators do it nowadays, specifically for kids, right? Talking about like Ryan's toy review, which this kid makes $12 million a year for opening up toys, playing with them on the internet. Yeah.
How come we can't do that?
Listen,
I blame Skype for the most part.
Listen, you want me to go get some toys? Like,
Here's
some bouncy balls.
Do we need to start reviewing these Paw Patrol shows?
You do that every time we have Nick on. He can talk about a pair of his sneakers, and then we'll get the clicks that way.
Around me.
And then we'll just do one whole episode where you're talking through the pinata behind you.
Okay, I'll do that. Gin, right? One bottle of gin. Another bottle of gin. So
we're off the rails.
Is there an audience for that where I can just talk about bottles of gin?
Maybe once you get a sponsorship.
That's the audience of one show right there.
That was alcoholism at that point. The audience of one with gin.
I did like too. They didn't really show much of it when they showed him when he stopped doing a kid show for a while and he went out and went to prisons and talked to inmates and then did other things. They kind of chalked it up that failed, but it would have been interesting to see some clips in there. Maybe talk to somebody who he spoke to that he helped or something.
Yeah, overall, I thought I liked it. It was not anything that was earth shattering in regards to some of these documentaries where you're just like kind of gut punched by them or learn something incredibly new. This validated. This kind of confirmed a lot of stuff that you already felt about him. But it was nice to see it. It was nice to.
It was nice to remember it because, like we said, we kind of like we said, we all watched it, but we kind of forget that we watched it. We're not sure. Like I can remember the trains, I can remember the puppets, but not any kind of lessons to it. So it was nice to go back and see how what he thought we could be, and teaching kids about assassinations and war, and like no one has the balls to do that even now. Like we so regressed in how we talk to kids and how we talk to each other.
That's a really good point. Talking about like this snowflake kind of mindset is this man had the courage to have these types of theme shows and bring up these really adult conversations with kids and do it in a way that wasn't insulting to them, wasn't completely over their heads. He found that balance of you're a child, So I can't really just come out and explain these concepts to you directly because it would destroy you and you probably wouldn't even understand or grasp some of these. But I respect you enough to have a conversation with you and not gloss over and say, oh, that was nothing. He's got ketchup on his head. That's what he's lying on the ground because he's got ketchup on his head. He'll be okay. He's going to go to a farm. He'll be fine. He's going to go to a Kennedy farm. That's where they send all the Kennedys.
Yeah, he did like a whole 5-minute thing, it seemed like, on burying a fish. It's like, everyone else would be like, hey, yeah, he's in fish heaven, and he's just flush him or whatever, and now he's swimming there. But
yeah, we're in a really weird spot with my daughter. She's about to turn 6, and we haven't really shied away from death conversations anymore. Like, we can't, right?
yeah, you've had some dogs, you're right.
Yeah. So I mean, in a way, it sounds bad, but it's helped, right? It's helped at least spur the conversation. But yes, as my wife says in the chat, we do need Daniel Tiger to explain where beef and chicken and all that comes from, because my kid still doesn't make the connection to that. Because I'll say
it's all from one magical animal.
Well, that's the funny thing. It's like I was like, oh look, it's a turkey leg. She's like, oh, you mean the food turkey or the animal turkey? Yes.
Aww.
It depends on what kind of cut you get. Sometimes you get it from the store and it's just processed non-bird turkey.
Yeah, my daughter loves steak. I don't know. I don't know if we should, when she finds out. Like, she gets fish. She gets the concept of fish.
Because fish still looks like fish.
Yeah, right. And she's like, we go to the grocery store, and she's like, why do they have lobsters in here? I'm like, well, we eat
fun.
No, you're silly. Am I?
Yeah, haven't had veal parmesan night yet, have you?
We don't eat veal in the house, so.
Okay.
Oh God, I snuck Dan's wife some veal once, unbeknownst to her. It did not go over well.
No.
Like, oh, what's the recipe? Oh, a little pork, a little veal. I was like, what?
Yeah.
That's
next year I set some aside that was veal free.
He doesn't actually say that he did it consecutive years. Just said the next year.
Next year when I remembered.
The following year after that, it's just all veal now. Oh lordy! Hey, listen. We talked about "Won't You Be My Neighbor." We could have been talking about circumcision this week, so you have that.
So
you have that.
Yeah.
Amanda did not want to talk about that. She's like, guys, listen. I will be on your show. She's like, I gotta find the exact messaging because Amanda's just so mean to me. I'm like,
well, you asked me if I wanted to do it, and I said only if Amanda does it.
And so I messaged Amanda and I sent her the website to this. She's like, wow. And I was like, circumcision or not, will you join us this week for a show? And she's like, I really need to get a life, so I have better excuses of not having to do your show. But at this point, I have no excuses.
No
I'm
excuse.
Like, wow, burn. That's pretty awful. But yeah,
I think I also mentioned that it seemed like more of an Abe topic, not to bring up Voldemort's name, but I was like, if you
say it 3 times, it just pops up. So.
Hey oh.
Oh, lordy. Yeah, well, listen, anytime we can have Amanda talking about genitals, but listen, she already talked about cleavage on the show today, so I mean, I guess that's a win.
That was the pre-show.
We slipped in one joke about Charmed. Man, and we were being rather mature in our discussions so far, aside from all of this. I just feel like we're like being disrespectful to all sorts of old dead white men tonight.
Thus the conversation about circumcision.
Well, I guess we're proving the point of the movie in that in the end it wasn't going to work out the way Mr. Rogers wanted, and that's why I left. Like, all the things we've watched lately from the past, be it Black Klansman a couple weeks ago, and everything else, kind of just leaves me sadder at the end of it because it's like, oh, we just never got better, huh?
I don't know how much of that is the current situation and how much of it is our age. Like, is that just like a thing that happens to you in your 30s? I mean, your late 20s.
I'm old. Listen, I sprained my MCL this week, and I'm just like, I realized.
Not even doing
I
anything
didn't even do
athletic,
it.
right?
That's right. I was in my garage and I was stepping over something, and I sprained my MCL, and it's just like, it's like, man, I am old. I'm an old man now. I drive a red sports car now. It's like I'm at my midlife crisis. It has happened.
I mean,
it's about 37. I was like,
I mean, what are the odds you make it past 74? You're due for midlife. Come on.
Listen, so I'm saying I can have my midlife crisis where I'm hobbling around on a sprained knee. It's terrible.
Well, good for you for even going to the doctor and figuring it out.
Oh no, I didn't go to the doctor. This is a WebMD.
Mr. Rogers would want you to go to the doctor because it's the responsible thing to do for your family.
Oh no, they said he didn't go to the doctor.
He didn't?
Yeah, that's
really?
I think at the end he didn't go to doctors a lot. He had stomach problems, and he just kind of died. They said.
Oh, sorry, never mind. I assumed that
That might have been a religious thing of his. They didn't really get into it. They just said he didn't like going to doctors.
Listen,
I mean, he seemed healthy.
Who needs to go to the doctors anymore when you have WebMD? They just put in the symptoms and it's good enough, right? I mean,
right. You have knee cancer. I understand. We're gonna start a GoFundMe right now for your knee cancer. Send Dan to Sundance Film Festival next year before he dies from knee cancer.
Oh, is there such a thing? There's got to be such a thing.
Knee cancer?
Yeah, right. Yes, like.
Why not?
Well, that was the one part of the documentary too that got me with the I guess the Make-A-Wish kid.
Yeah, that was great.
Oh, if that didn't kill you.
Yeah, that was great.
I'm assuming the guy died because they only showed him briefly.
And his parents.
Yeah, his parents were still alive, and he wasn't.
I don't think we would have been crying about circumcision.
I wouldn't have been.
If they were doing live ones, and if it was one kid to make a wish thing, I think that'd been weird. I might have cried about that.
So apparently, the thesis behind that documentary, I think it's called American Circumcision, is that the thesis is that the movie was saying how wrong it is and that people shouldn't do it. So that was the angle of the movie.
The angle.
The angle. Yeah. Let's talk about something even sadder. Burt Reynolds died.
She would talk about cock. He was a cocksman.
Not towards the end. He became.
He became creepy at the end.
He kind of like disowned Boogie Nights towards the end. He pulled a Marky Mark and disowned Boogie Nights.
But he had some weird thing with Sally Field about a year ago, didn't he?
Did he?
Where he was going on about how they, about their relationship, and she was kind of creeped out about it. She kind of told him, "Hey, can you stop talking about that?"
No.
I think he said she was the one who got away, and he regretted it, and he still thought about her, and she was like, "Yeah, that's creepy," which it kind of is. I don't know.
He seemed off in the last few years anyway. He didn't seem all there. He hadn't done a role in a while either, right?
No, not nothing, major. He's got something listed as coming out. So
yeah.
He's on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which was filming. Mm-hmm. So, but that's the Brad Pitt, Leo DiCaprio, Quentin Tarantino movie. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what role he would add in that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a huge Burt Reynolds fan. I mean, you think about some of the movies that. Smoking the Bandit, right? Deliverance, Longest Yard.
Yeah. Longest Yard again.
Longest Yard again. Yeah. Longest Yard Part 2. Is that the Adam Sandler one? He was in that one too, right?
Yeah. He became the old guy and the coach again in that one.
Yes. I mean, to me, like Boogie Nights is it for me. You know, sad, I guess.
Yeah, that was like his
you know.
comeback moment where like he showed he can act because he was kind of like a hunk character from the 80s and 70s, I guess, and then.
Well,
What about All
Striptease. I
Dogs
thought
Go
that
to
was
Heaven?
Striptease. He was just hilariously stupid. I thought I
Mhm.
just enjoyed that.
yeah.
I mean, he did a whole scene covered in Vaseline. I mean, that's pretty impressive. They get a guy with that character to do that. You know.
Yeah, that's when he needed money, I bet.
Oh, I'm sure he needed money the whole time.
Cocaine can be very expensive.
Cocaine and divorces will do that to a guy.
So you died of a heart attack. I was like, well, you know.
Yeah,
Listen,
82 though. It's not like
82.
it wasn't a.
So you guys aren't like personally really distraught. He wasn't like a hero to you or
No,
anything.
I'm trying to think of who would be like, you know, I'm trying to think of what actor or what entertainer is gonna like kind of devastate me because the more recent ones like it's like David Bowie. It's like yeah, I like David Bowie's music. That was kind of sad. Went out like a champ. Kind of cool.
More the ones that are tragic will get you, but I mean, for a guy to die at 82, it's like
But even so, like if you love, like if someone's like one of your favorite, like like if Mark Hamill dies,
Oh, sure, I'll
you'd be
be cool.
destroyed.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh,
but even
Gary Fisher
if he's
dying
old,
2 years ago, hurt.
yeah. So I don't have one yet. I don't have like this celebrity.
Everyone we grew up watching is still because we were expecting more people to live longer now essentially. So for anyone that we grew up watching to die is like would be somewhat shocking at this point.
Dimebag Darrell was a tough one for me.
Robin Williams dying I thought was hard. I mean, James Gandolfini, not weren't crushing blows, but it was like oh shit, those kind of things.
I think I feel like when one of the Spice Girls dies, that like because I so identify that with me being young.
Sure. Okay.
Like I think that will hit me really hard in terms of just realizing my own personal mortality more than I do on a nightly basis while I'm laying in bed and can't fall asleep. Like I'll be thinking about dying like all day. Would we finally lose Sexy Spice? Sorry, I couldn't even finish that bit without laughing. I don't know, but I feel like someone famous who's like our age or closer to our age, it would be like.
Yeah, I mean we've lost a few tragically as far as suicide and stuff like that.
Bourdain, yeah, my way. I was upset about Anthony Bourdain. I really liked him a lot. Phil Hartman.
Heath Ledger.
That was a tough one.
And that was horrible too. It's like, wait, God, just like you just get killed like that. I was like, oh, Jesus Christ.
I think if anything happened to Hank Azaria, I think I'd be devastated. I realize how much I love Hank Azaria, and the show that Brockmire is a fantastic show that he's doing now. Yeah. But just thinking, I was like, man, they killed that poo.
Any of the Star Trek actors is hard.
Oh,
I mean, we already lost them. I mean,
well, yeah, but so Leonard Nimoy was hard.
Yeah, Shatner's gonna go.
Shatner soon, but if Jean-Luc Picard,
when Patrick Stewart goes, I mean, that'll be rough for him.
Yeah, Brent Spiner.
Yeah.
Did you see his tweet? Oh, I think you liked it, right? His tweet about
Yeah, it was Michael Dorn.
If someone writes an anonymous op-ed about me, just know that it was Michael Dorn. Marty's like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
No, I'm aware of the Trekkies.
But
aware.
Yeah, aware. Being a Star Wars guy, I'm aware of them. I'm familiar with some of their.
It seems like that franchise is dead. They're not. That no one's gonna do that fourth one. It seems.
Oh, they got the. Well, I mean that franchise like that.
Yeah. I mean they got that series.
They have the Patrick Stewart thing coming up. Yeah. I mean that's exciting. I think it's exciting. People seem to be excited.
It's exciting. It's exciting.
I think so. I'd be interested in watching that. I love Next Generation.
I'm not going to pay for CBS. I can't do it.
I still haven't watched Discovery because I didn't want to. I didn't want to do it.
It was funny watching the Mr. Rogers here. How similar this guy is to him. It seems. Big Bang Theory. What's his name?
Sheldon.
They're spitting images. It's almost.
Oh, by the way, so we're watching this. My wife's like, "Oh, Colin Hanks should really play Mr. Rogers in a biopic," and I just found out that Tom Hanks is actually playing Mr. Rogers in a biopic that comes out next year.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That must be an older.
It's like an older one, I guess. Yeah, but Colin Hanks, like, yeah, I totally agree. You look at that,
There's also a Jim Carrey show.
And Tom both play him,
Yeah, if they do flashbacks, I think that would work. But yeah, there's a Jim Carrey show coming out on Showtime next month. It's like a Mr. Rogers-like character who kind of snaps.
Yeah.
So, not so much snaps, but behind the scenes, his life's falling apart, type shit. So that could be interesting.
Very underrated movie, Death to Smoochie. Speaking of Robin Williams.
Yeah.
It's a similar kind of that was the Barney the dinosaur thing.
Yeah, with the Ed Norton and Danny DeVito, who was the Robin Williams. He was the really crazy guy. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Jon Stewart.
What's it? You got nothing else?
I think
any other news?
There wasn't. I mean, there's hardly any movie stuff going on right now compared to all the other stuff going on. So
yeah, I must say this was a nice. This was a nice escape from what yesterday was the first time I watched cable news for like straight in a while. So like come 10 o'clock, I decided I gotta turn on Mr. Rogers too. I get the fuck away from this.
This has been. I can't even.
It's like I so many times like it's fucking Wednesday, man. And this was a 2-day week. We didn't even have Monday this week.
Speaking of Abe, and I think it's the third time we mentioned him. It makes me realize how much of a lodestar that he was for the show.
A what?
A lodestar.
Are you making that up?
Oh, that's a code word from the op-ed.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
That's why they think that's why they think it's coming from Pence.
That's one of my favorite memes. Is it's Trump as a dark helmet, and it's like lodestar.
I mean, there's no way one of his passwords isn't 1 2 3 4.
It's the nuke code right there, Marty. Come on, stop it. All those Russian bots that watch the show, they now know how to launch nuclear codes from Trump's office. I don't see how Mr. Rogers, if he was alive today, doesn't just kill himself.
I mean, like I said, though, the first episode he did was about Trump.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Friday, living in his high castle, wanted to build a big wall to keep out all the poor people. There you go.
Listen, he wanted to protect his kingdom. All right, Marty. Let's say it that way. He was trying to protect his people.
That's the funny thing about you could watch the people saying, "Well, Mr. Rogers," he would just say, "Hey, go watch my show from back." All the lessons are still there. You just didn't follow them.
You can kind of get the impression that Donald Trump did not watch Mr. Rogers. Or if he did, he's like, "Who's this loser?"
That King Friday's got some good ideas. I don't know why they're fucking with him so much.
His son's, by the way, Prince Wednesday.
Definitely didn't want.
Prince Wednesday. Yeah.
Those two fucking. Next week is gonna be really fun. I can't drink for next episode. I'm gonna tell you that right now. That'll get bad.
Listen, I have not committed to talking about abortion next week. I have not.
It's definitely time. I mean, they're putting this Netflix thing out perfectly timed with what's going on in it.
With the.
Our next new lord of the court.
Well,
Well, this is gonna be a bummer. This is just leaving on a downer. Can we please talk about Amanda? Some comic book stuff
Falcons are up 3-0 on the Eagles. That's good, right?
Amanda, anything comic book? Just gonna cheer us up.
Well, I was just gonna say that Jamil and I had a great time talking about Dragon Ball Z,
Yes.
which is a show that is entertaining and also teaches you the power of love and friendship and waiting around for the guy to fix all your problems.
Didn't it also blind kids at some point during when it first?
Oh,
isn't that the show that would give kids seizures because it was too much?
I don't think so. But they probably deserved it if they did.
Stupid kids sitting all close to the television.
Gotta weed out the weaklings.
Yeah.
But no, it was just I went back and I listened to it and I was like, because normally you can't stand the sound of your own voice, and I was like, is this what I sound like when I'm happy? And so I would tell people to go listen to that to hear what we sound like when we're happy. But I would also remind everyone that the last episode of Dragon Ball Z Abridged, they released the first part. They're releasing it in like 3 or 4 parts. So Dragon Ball Z Abridged released a new episode if people haven't watched that yet. So Dragon Ball Z, love, power, friendship, punching.
I mean, half of those things, I guess, Mr.
Mr.
Rogers
Rogers
would get
some
behind.
some of that, yeah.
Dragon Ball Z is like if Mr. Rogers and like, I don't know, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles went to Japan and had like a love child, because you know, like go like, you know, like they're like Goku's just like a really nice guy and he wins and they punch stuff. It's great.
And they roll up their pants legs and splash their feet in some
right. Well, no. Actually, like, I'm not joking. Dragon Ball Z, every single villain became an ally. And that is like some serious Mr. Rogers shit. Like, you listen to people, you forgive them, you lead by example. Okay?
Go listen to her show.
Kagito ergo sum. Therefore, Mr. Rogers is Goku. Get me those Dragon Balls. He's coming back.
Good night, everybody.
Close out another episode of the Musto Show. We may or may not be back next week to talk about abortion. So.
Oh god, that's how you sell it. Jesus Christ.
We will be talking about abortion. You better come join us next week.
Yeah, right. Get your hangers ready.
Martin.
Can we edit this?
No.
Can we edit this out?
This is it. This is typical Martin fashion. He's not even drinking. Please tell me you are drinking. No, you're water. This is true Martin fashion. Just completely. We are now, after this comment, we are definitely not talking about abortion next week.
Oh, come on.
It's not going to happen.
That's a precursor for where we're going in our society. I can't tell if Amanda quit or she just froze again.
No. Just breathe.
This is
deeply and calmly.
This is the silence.
And
good night, everybody. Bye.
See you all in hell.